Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 2 of Sunday Scaries. We're just getting ready here as we go live, but first and foremost, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. If you are new to Sunday Scaries, if this is your first time, please message in the chat, maybe an emoji, how you're feeling. If you're watching from YouTube or Instagram, hello. We are here for Sunday Scaries. This is the second live stream Sunday Scaries. So I am so excited to be here with all of you because we're going to get into some topics this week to help you combat your Sunday Scaries together with real conversation, real tactics, and real support that will ultimately, hopefully, help you feel more empowered as we head into the work week. Okay. So, if you've never been to Sunday Scaries before, we talk about a little bit of everything. And today we actually have some key topics that we're going to discuss that are relating to not only current events in the career space to get your feedback. And I want to hear from the community about how you feel about some of these things because I saw some stuff this week and I think we should have a dialogue about it. Um, but before we begin, I want to highlight a couple of things, especially if this is your first time watching Sunday Scaries. First and foremost, if you get to Sunday and you get anxious about the workday, you get stressed out, please make sure that you are a part of my newsletter community. I am sending out tons of resources every day through my newsletter, and there's always the opportunity to work with me one on one. Yes, you and I can work together one on one. And if you go to my link in bio, if you are watching from Instagram or if you're watching from YouTube, you can click that link to work with me so that I can help you in partnership combat those Sunday scaries together. Hey, everybody on Instagram. So, we are diving in first and foremost with something a little different because, listen, I saw this article come through and I knew I had to share it with my community, because I wanted to see from you all, am I the only one who thinks this way and is a little bit concerned? But also, have a broader discussion about the real tactics to help you not only combat this mentality and these concerns in the workplace, but also to empower yourself as you think about some folks here. So I am going to, hopefully, it will let me see if I can pull that down and move this up. All right, y'all. So we are going to get started with an article, and maybe some of you have seen this article. It has been floating around for a minute, for the last week, really. And when I saw this headline, I thought, you know what, we are going to kick off Sunday Scaries talking about this because I think it's part of a broader conversation. And you might have seen my reel earlier today, where I talked about how the reason why corporate culture in the United States is dying is because leaders are refusing with dear life. They are gripping with their hands as clasped as hard as possible to refuse the fact that the way in which that they are thinking about their teams, the way in which they are thinking about how employees should be treated is not only antiquated, it is often inhumane. And this is highlighted no other than with the CMO of Squarespace saying that Gen Z job seekers, and frankly, you and I both know that they mean everyone, right? Should be willing to do anything in the workplace. And if you scroll through the article, which this was written by Oriana Rosa Royale for Fortune. Um, this was a quote, a direct quote from uh Kinjil Mathur, who is the CMO of Squarespace, who basically was talking about how when they were looking for an internship as they were growing up, they just wanted experience. And we've heard this mentality before, right? How many of you have heard the whole, just being lucky to be in the room, grind, the intern who grabs the coffees? We've all heard this, right? But the fact that in this day and age, in 2026, this conversation is still happening, in light of all of the revelations that are going on around us about how difficult quality of life is for folks paying rent, for doing all the things they need to do, I thought that seeing this was outrageous, but for a couple of reasons. One, if you are a leader who is watching Sunday Scaries, maybe you follow my platform and you are concerned about culture on your team, I want you to really reflect on whether or not you are enabling practices like this at your organization, or at minimum, your organization is still maintaining processes like this. When I was at every organization I have had the privilege of being a leader in, I always made sure that our interns were compensated for this very reason. Because listen, they got to eat just like everybody else. And I think there is this antiquated mentality that is still carried over from, frankly, when folks had to do this, that is really harmful not only to those interns, but what standard are we setting, especially disproportionately to marginalized groups, right? There are a lot of folks who cannot afford, think about these internships that are downtown or in other states. They may be qualified for them, but then you tell them that they're unpaid. You have to pay for your own housing, you have to pay for your own transportation. We do not live in a world anymore where it is at all reasonable to expect interns in any variety, but frankly, this includes graduate interns and so on, to not be fairly compensated for the work that they're doing. And especially when a lot of these organizations are still taking ideas from these interns and all kinds of elements. If you can find the budget to hire employees, you can absolutely find the budget to pay your interns. And so seeing this pop up this week, I was like, whoo, we're going to kick off Sunday Scaries with this because it is so sad to me that we still live in a time where people still think that this is a standard when in reality it's not. In fact, in many organizations where I've led operations, I have cultivated and built the infrastructure around internships where they were not only paid well, they were paid in a way that was commiserate with the experience that each of those interns had, because the last thing I want my interns thinking about is whether or not they're going to be able to eat that week while they're also trying to deliver for the organization. And the end result was that not only were they more productive, they were appreciative of the opportunity, and frankly they worked harder because they didn't have to worry about where how they were going to pay for rent, let alone anything else that they have to pay for in between school and that summer. So I would love to hear your comments as you see it. Again, you can see here, this is where the article is from. It's from Fortune if you want to review that yourself. But I think it is really nuts to me that we still live in a time where CMO CEOs think that that's acceptable just because they experience that. It kind of goes back to that mentality, right? Of people just don't want to work anymore, right? Remember that quote from our friends, Miss Kardashian. I know that shook the table quite a bit, and of course, she had later on recounted and said that, she really just meant that she believes that people should be working harder. But that is the mentality for a lot of senior leaders. They genuinely believe that interns, people who are working, don't grind the same way anymore, when in reality, people are just demanding for equitable treatment. If I'm working for your organization and I just so happen to be an intern, I should be paid just like any other employee at that organization. But sound off in the comments if you agree, or maybe if you have a different opinion. But I feel like all of us who have experienced an internship of any kind, we know what it felt like to hustle. And it makes it significantly harder when you're also like, shoot, do I need to get a second job on top of this internship so I can eat? Looking at some of your comments, I see internships, but they have senior responsibilities for minimum wage. So entry level cannot find work, and 50 plus cannot accept the jobs due to lacking pay. Everyone's time is valuable. I love this because it's true. Everyone's time is valuable. If you are a senior leader who is trying to be a part of systemic change and you have anxiety heading into the workplace because you realize that maybe your time isn't seen as valuable, I want you to think about the person at your organization who is working for free, putting out great outputs, getting that experience like the CMO said, but doing so without compensation. For a lot of people, and actually I remember one time I was when I was talking to an organization I was working for about properly compensating our interns, I had a senior leader looked shocked at me when I said, "You do know that a lot of people cannot physically afford to move to Chicago for the summer, and like figure it out just on their own. They don't have parents maybe who can afford to pay for $1,000 a month, or multi-thousand-dollar a month apartments in the city. They don't have transportation. They whatever the case may be. And so if we believe that they're qualified for this opportunity, we should be creating the infrastructure around them so that they can receive the opportunity. And there's this, I think this privilege that a lot of senior leaders have where they can say, looking back, well, I had to grind, well, I had to work hard. But I believe that if you are a senior leader who is really trying to change this dying corporate culture, because it is dying, and a lot of the reason it starts here at the internship level is by first acknowledging just because we had to struggle or just because you did doesn't mean that everyone behind you has to and earn their stripes, which is again a very antiquated method of leadership, and doesn't actually benefit you or anyone else, for that matter. So, when I saw that article, she was gobsmacked. She was stressed. And that I think leads me into, I posted a reel earlier this evening talking about why I believe corporate culture is dying. And as you're heading into work, there's a couple of things that I want to impart upon you as you are reflecting on. Maybe your company has announced recently that they're going to be doing a new hybrid schedule. Maybe they've announced that they're going to be maybe reducing professional development spend. Maybe you've been advocating over and over again for opportunity and they keep kicking that can down the line. One of the reasons I think that culture in general is really falling to the wayside, in around the United States, is because of the divestment in the opportunities that actually keep employees wanting to stay at an organization. I actually posted a video 2 days ago talking about this, where I said that, listen, if you want to work remote, or no, though, this was last week, but I said, if you want to work remotely, here is how you can do so. And I said big reason why companies are pushing back on remote work is because of the appearance of leadership, the perception of management. And I had quite a few leaders send me some pretty uncomfortable comments, both on Facebook and on Instagram and on TikTok, about how I had it all wrong, and how, the real reason why these companies are going back to hybrid is because of these leases and this and that. That's just not accurate. Many organizations, while yes, have leases they've been folded into for longer term contracts, I can tell you from my research that a lot of organizations have bought up new leases. In Chicago alone, I think the most recent statistic is that 75% of the office available space in the city is vacant, meaning that it is a buyer's market right now. So these companies are buying these spaces because it's probably for a lot of them the first time that they're getting these premium offices at low prices with, really, all the amenities, all the bells and whistles, and uh and all of those elements. And so they are absolutely seeing the big shiny offices or whatever the case, and then they are asking the employees to make that purchase make sense. And I've seen this across the board, not only in Chicago and New York and LA, but across the globe, these organizations buying up this space and then expecting you to fill those seats, because then that perception of we're full, and also it helps this narrative of, see, people really want to be back in office, people want that. I'll be honest with you, a lot of folks do want to be back in the workplace, but a lot of folks don't. For a lot of people, it is incredibly disruptive to be in the workplace. In fact, I remember getting into a conversation with, and please share in the comments, do you like hybrid? Do you prefer remote? What would you prefer? And maybe share why. And I'll pull a couple comments up to share. But I know for me, I said once, to leaders who we were having a talk about the hybrid to remote conversation, and I said to them, for me, I actually really don't. I really would prefer not to be in office as often as I am currently. And I'll never forget, the CEO like looked so frustrated at me for saying that openly, because there were other leaders in the room. But I was being honest. I said, I never get any work done when I'm here. People are constantly pulling me this way and that way and this way and that way. And so when I am like ready to actually get some work done, I actually have to lock myself in a conference room. And this is in every industry I've worked in. And remember, I've worked in over 10. So in every industry I've worked in, I've had to hide myself in another office or a conference room or somewhere else, because otherwise people are bothering me all day. And you may say, well, Beverly, that's your job. You're the operator. Like, people need to be able to reach you. But it truly is the case that for a lot of people it's disruptive. And I've always said I love the in-office collaboration. I love the conversation. I see somebody commented here that said less office drama working in person. I do believe that a hybrid schedule can work. However, like I said, I got a lot of comments from folks who are saying, Beverly, like, it's not as simple as companies forcing people back and off. Yeah, it is actually. It is that simple because if they wanted to save the overhead, they would just have their teams remote. So it's always deeper than it potentially looks. We have a question here from YouTube. Thank you so much for your question that I'm going to take a look at. So it says, any tips on transitioning from healthcare administration to the operations department? Well, you have asked the absolute right person because, yes, and actually, the subject matter theme for today is about transitions because if you're working at an organization that thinks that you should not be paid properly for the work you do, if you are working at an organization that does not empower you, whether you're a leader or an employee, then transitioning and pivoting is absolutely the next move. So how do you do that? Um, I am going to pause a second to make sure I'm like in frame because I keep shifting and sliding. Okay, here we go. So how do you do that? Well, first, I've done this. So I used to work as a practice manager in the healthcare space. I was a practice manager at a boutique orthopedic clinic for a couple of years. And I knew that, a larger overarching benefit to me having worked in that space was how many operational elements I was able to touch. Now, the first thing about any transition, and definitely comment if you all are thinking about this right now where you're like, I think I want to make a career pivot, but I'm not entirely sure how to do so. One of the recommendations that I have for folks who are one of the recommendations I have for people who are looking to transition from where they are now to somewhere else is think about all the ways that you are doing that thing right now. So if you are looking to transition into operations and you currently work in healthcare, administration, ask yourself, as I look at all these job descriptions for operations roles, maybe office operations, business operations, people operations, there's so many different subsets. What are the things I am currently doing in my role right now that also align with those opportunities? Because oftentimes when we go to make a pivot, and I say the general we because as I've coached folks, and remember, you can click my link in bio to work with me one on one, and I can help you with your pivot directly. Um, but I've noticed as I've worked with clients one on one, people know where they want to go, but they don't know how to tell that story on how they are going to get there. And so, if you've already been sitting in that truth of doing the work, then it becomes very easy for you to communicate that out when you're interviewing, when you're putting it on your resume, and when you're putting it on your LinkedIn. A great example of this is when I was working in healthcare, I knew I wanted to be in tech. Now, I had always had that aspiration of being a COO by the time I was 30, which I did achieve. And a big through line for those pivots, because I pivoted in multiple industries to make that a reality, was how am I existing in an operations leadership capacity right now? When I moved to tech, one of the job applications that I routinely was applying to was office administration because it was closest aligned to my work as a front end manager and then eventually a practice coordinator. I was looking at customer care and customer service operations because again, it's a very being in patient care and patient like phone work and all of that is very customer service heavy. And so what I did is I looked at job descriptions that highlighted 90% of the job description was something I was already doing. And then what I did is I tried to position myself based off of, again, I wanted to go into the tech space from healthcare. So I said, okay, where in my environment am I already interfacing with technology? And if the answer is no, because for the first year, the answer really was no, how do I add that experience now before I'm already in the process of starting to apply? So in my case, we had a gap at the organization where nobody really wanted to touch IT. Nobody was really interested in IT. And so me knowing I wanted to be in the tech industry, I said, hey, I'll do it. I'll be our IT lead and take care of the infrastructure on that front. What happened then is that I not only became our IT lead, but I also became our lead for our POS systems. I became our lead for our EMR systems. I became the lead for literally the entire tech stack of the clinic. So naturally, as I was applying to tech roles, as I was transitioning out of healthcare, I was able to speak to all of the things that I had touched and all the systems I had touched, the softwares I had touched, and the collaborations I had made, including with ticketing systems and scenarios, so that when I was asked about those things, both for hardware and for SaaS, I had an answer for it. And I felt confident in that answer because I had actually done the work. So if you are thinking right now about a career pivot and you're a little hesitant or concerned about how to communicate that career pivot, I cannot recommend enough. If you have the ability to start doing the things that you are looking to transition to now. Like, let's say you are, in my scenario, right? You see a gap that is actually applicable to where you want to go. Fill that gap because it is actually such a aligned way for you to add that experience to your resume without necessarily adding a ton more work to yourself. And when it comes time for that interview, that's the most important thing. People talk about when they talk about pivots about, how do I transition and how do I make, those moves? But really what you need to do is be able to win over those recruiters and those hiring managers who are going to look at your resume. They're going to see you have applicable experience. They're going to be impressed by your experience because you're going to be hustling doing these tactics. But they may have questions about applicability because, again, for me, I was coming from healthcare, pretty like, traditional patient operations. How do I communicate to a tech startup or a larger tech company or a healthcare SaaS company, that I'm actually applicable and able to do the job? Well, because I've already done it, I'll feel good about it. The other thing I want you to think about too is what I call my adjacency model. Now, if you have been in my classes, um, if you've been in any of my classes, if you have worked with me one-on-one, you probably have heard me talk about my adjacency model. The adjacency model is how I was able to pivot in really the last time I counted, it was 20 industries. Over my entire career, but 10 in the last, let's say over 10, I think it was 13 in the last 10. The way in which I was able to pivot so seamlessly in all of those industries was because of this adjacency model. Essentially, for you, transitioning from healthcare administration to operations, right? Think about, what industries are you already adjacent to? So if you're like, I am in the healthcare space right now, but I want to move to operations, the first thing I would think for you is clinics. Like I just mentioned, I worked at a small startup orthopedic clinic. There's PT clinics that need operations managers that also need to have healthcare experience. There's doctors offices, right? Independent doctors offices that need operations experience and front end managers. So think about the adjacency that's in your already existing field and already existing skill set, because then that can carry you as you start apply. And again, that applicability is going to really shine on your resume. And that's what helped me is I was always leaning adjacent to where I wanted to be, so that ultimately, when it came time to do that storytelling, I was able to knock it out the water like you will. Thank you so much for this question. I see we've got some more. Let's see here. Da-da, da, da, da. Okay, this one comes from Instagram. Must you supervise people at the VP or director level? Well, it depends. Historically, for senior leadership roles, you are expected, excuse me. Oh, hey, y'all. Wait, I see some folks in the, oh my gosh. Hey, I see y'all on Instagram. Um, if you are striving to be a senior leader, historically, not always, there's always going to be nuance, but historically, there is always going to be an expectation that you will be supervising at least one person. Now, there are also IC roles, independent contributor roles, where you are rising through the ranks as a leader in your own right, but you don't necessarily supervise people. So, a good example of this is somebody who is a principal engineer, right? They are the senior most person on their employee line for engineering, and they may not actually be overseeing anyone, versus the senior director of technology or the CTO. They're going to oversee folks. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, if I want to scale and grow in my career, but I don't want to be responsible for overseeing folks, I don't want to necessarily be a leader. First, I want to thank you, because far too many people are sitting in leadership roles right now today who have no business being there, because that was the only pathway that they had to be promoted. And their teams suffer for it. They suffer for it, because I can't tell you how many leaders I have worked with who, like, they have to do my one-on-one now. I have to document it's time for the year reviews. Now I got it. I mean, they really just want to sit and work in their specific expertise function. But the only way to scale up was to uh was to be promoted as a leader. So I want to thank you. If you're already hold on. Hold on. Now, this is how you can tell that this is live. I'm about to lose my entire mic setup. Okay, let's see. Are we gonna topple or are we gonna be okay? Okay. All I was gonna say is thank you. You know what? Wait, hold on. This is actually so funny. This is how you know it's live. Hold on a minute. Okay, hold on. Is this in here? Please hold on one moment as I take care of some technical difficulties on my side. There we go. I was wondering why my mic was moving all around this and that way, and alas, it was because it was about to fall off. Um, Anywhosies, all I was saying was thank you, because I think more leaders need to come forward and say, you know what, maybe leadership isn't for me, and then find those independent contributor roles that actually are more applicable and will probably also aid and help their teams who feel that energy from them. Needless to say, though, um, if you are trying to strive to VP and director level roles historically, and this is in my experience, you will be expected to supervise teams. And so that's something to think about as you are striving for leadership opportunities. These are great questions, y'all. Um, and thank you so much to everybody who has been asking questions. And listen, this is Sunday Scaries. If you're just joining, um, this is a great space to ask questions so you can hear directly from me on my feedback. But most importantly, also that you can combat those Sunday Scaries with your chief empowerment officer. So, oh my goodness. Let me just we're doing it live, you know? Beverly, I must say your advice is top tier. You are so correct about work about not networking. Congratulations. Okay, this is a great segue actually. And I think wait, this is a good question. Thank you for this. So I'm gonna come back to that comment in a minute because I just saw this question from back up. Okay, somebody from IG asked, and thank you so much for your question. Would you use AI to help plan a pivot? Now, here, this is what I'm always going to say. AI, and somebody actually said this really well the other day who was talking about AI best practices and how you can best leverage AI for your career growth. The thing you have to remember about AI is that it tabulates by ways of the mean, meaning that it is going to take the mean of any scenario that you give it to provide you with advice, which means that there's not going to be a lot of room for nuance for you. Can ChatGPT help you with adjacent fields in relation to your resume and experience? As absolutely, or AI, I should say in general. Absolutely. Can AI help you with a transition plan where you're planning out, okay, how you're going to apply to those adjacent industries based off of what you already like to do? Absolutely. Should AI be the tool that you use solely to curate your pivot? No. And the reason for that is because you won't know the industries that you won't know the industries that are really going to be where you want to pivot until you actually start looking through the job descriptions yourself. Maybe, I mean, really, I can't recommend networking enough, specifically combing through your personal and your connections on LinkedIn if you have a LinkedIn, to having coffees and talking to people who are in this space, because I can't tell you how many times in my career I thought for sure I wanted to do something, and I'm so grateful that I networked with somebody who was already in that industry, already in that role, and I learned pretty quickly, oops, that actually is not for me. And I'm glad that I asked a few people about this before I pivoted my entire career strategy towards something I thought would make sense. So, if anything, my recommendation would be make sure that you are first zeroing in and locking in on exactly where you want to pivot to first by way of human connection and your own, research. You can utilize a tool like Perplexity. I actually did a demo on Perplexity recently where you can look up research and data on certain industries if you're concerned about job growth opportunity, as it relates to the current market and all of that. But my chief advice to you would be use AI to help you execute the pivot, but not to plan it, because you need to first have really meaningful dialogue with folks, if you can, who are already in that industry, already sitting in those roles, who can then give you the insight that will let you know if it's actually somewhere you want to go, or even down to if this is just the field or the type of industry you want to be in. Maybe you want to be an engineer, but you want to be, and you thought you wanted to be a health tech engineer. You interview a bunch of engineers there, and you're like, oh, maybe that's not what I want to be doing. So actually, you want to be an engineer in tech or whatever the case may be. There's nuances everywhere. Use the AI to help execute, but not to necessarily plan, because that does take human nuance that AI can't provide you. Great question. Okay, here's another question from Instagram. Okay, what advice do you have for someone who just sucks at interviewing? You know, I am really glad that you asked this question, because I have to say that this question makes me really sad. I posted a video a couple weeks ago about the halo effect and the horn effect. And definitely comment in the comments if you saw that video. Maybe that's why even some of you found my page to begin with. Um, the halo effect and the horn effect are a phenomena that have been around for 100 years plus. There's research literally going back 100 years on this phenomena. And essentially, I talked about in that video how you can prevent the horn effect by talking about your achievements and the things that you've excelled in your life. And I cannot tell you how many comments on that video, I mean, in the hundreds of comments of people saying, "Well, what if I'm just average? Or what if I'm just not great? Or what if I don't have any accomplishments? Or what if I haven't done anything worth celebrating?" And the first piece of advice I would give to anybody who feels like they suck at interviewing, like they don't have much value, like they don't have much to offer, is, in order for you to achieve the success that you are genuinely looking for in your career, whatever that means for you. For some folks, that is as simple as, listen, Beverly, I just want a job that pays the bills, period. For others, that, Beverly, I want to be like you. I want to be a C suite, whatever that is. I want to start my own businesses, whatever. You have got to invest. You have to invest in the shadow work on what it is that is preventing you from believing that you are great. What is it that is making you nervous in the interview process? For some people, it's the stakes. Like, everything is riding on this, so I have to get this right. Who's talking to you when those thoughts come up? Because it's not you. Somebody somewhere, that voice is coming into your head saying you're sucking right now, or I can't I can't talk about, there's nothing fabulous about me to talk about, so I don't have a halo because there's nothing interesting about me. Or I keep messing up in the interview process, so I'm never going to get a good job. Who is talking to you when that voice comes up? Because until you address that voice and where it's coming from, it will always be there. It will always, always, always be there, because unfortunately, it is a self fulfilling prophecy. If you are somebody who believes that you suck at interviewing, you will never walk into the interview space feeling like you're great at it. That's not how it works. So until you address, okay, what specifically do I feel I suck at? The first piece of advice I would give, after I would ask you to really do that shadow work to investigate your self concept and who's talking to you. The next thing is, okay, what do I feel I'm not very strong in? So maybe it's the STAR method. A lot of folks who work with me one on one hate the STAR method. They struggle with it. It's difficult for them. And frankly, if you're a hiring manager watching this right now, please stop requiring your candidates to do very stringent and restrictive methods that may not be natural to their way of speaking and the way in which they communicate. I recognize what it's there for. I understand that it is there to streamline the interview process, make sure you get, the full process of the answer that you're looking for from the candidate. But many people, I would argue most people, do not think and communicate in that way. And while for some folks it can be helpful because it helps streamline their thoughts, so many folks struggle with sticking to one particular method. So if you're finding that, STAR method, and I've always been trained and taught by career coaches and help, supporters and advice people that I need to speak in star method, and that just doesn't work for you, or whatever method you've been using, stop using it. Stop. Stop trying to force yourself into a box that does not fit. Right? So that could be a reason. If you are struggling because you stumble over your words a lot, you're not quite sure about, how you want to respond. I could say to you, "Oh, you should practice your responses more, blah, 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 blah." But the reality is there's a reason why you're stumbling. Is it because you're unsure about the experiences that you had? Are you unsure about your impact? Are you concerned that your impact isn't enough to wow the interviewers? Because the reality is, they would not have invited you into that interview if you were not qualified for that job. And so many people are suffering with imposter syndrome right now without remembering that as hiring managers, we do not waste our time. So if we see, you know how much of a miracle it is that you got an interview in this hiring process right now? Like, you are so exceptional that your ATS, like the resume went through the ATS, was got through. Then a human saw it, loved what you've done in your career, found it applicable, found it exciting, found it to the point where they want to interview you because they think you are applicable for the job. And then you walk into the room and you're nervous because of all this context, right? And it makes you forget why you're in that room to begin with. You are in that room because they are excited to be there with you. They're excited to learn about you. They saw something on your resume that excited them so damn much. Okay? That they were thrilled to have you in it. So another piece of advice I would give you is to remember that, to remember, you know what? They would not be inviting me into this interview if they weren't excited. So let me relax a little bit. Let me take a breath. That's the third piece of advice I would give you. Take a breath before every answer. And I'll be honest, as a hiring manager, I have seen when candidates have done this, and I've always been appreciative, because there is this knee jerk, because we can tell when candidates don't either, when it's like, well, and you're just jumping straight into the question because you're nervous. You owe it to yourself to practice that breath. And this can be something that you can do with your friends, or you can do with a family member. Or you can say, "Hey, can you ask me these questions? I'm not even going to answer them." You can say, "I'm not going to answer these questions, but can you ask them to me? Ask me these interview questions." And this is something you can use AI with. "Can you ask me these questions? And then I'm just going to practice taking a breath. That's all I'm going to do. Ask me a question." Okay. Just that is enough to also ground yourself in the moment so that you can recall all of the incredible things that you've done. Because remember, your resume is memory recall. The fourth piece of advice I would give to somebody who feels that they suck at interviewing is, I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge that on my website, beverlydines.com, you can literally work with me directly. Okay. You can work with me directly for my mock interview mastery package. And within it, I interview you like a hiring manager so that we can work together within acute diagnoses together, like exactly what's tripping you up, exactly what type of questions are concerning you, exactly what type of method maybe would work best for you. So make that investment in working with somebody who has been a leader in so many different industries. So I will interview you like a hiring manager would, and I'll be able to see. It's the only time you'll have an incubator where an actual literal hiring manager can tell you real advice that, so-called experts who have not sat in hiring manager seats like I have won't be able to tell you. So those are some of the methodologies. But I think a lot of it starts with your self-concept and asking yourself, who is telling me that I suck? Because you don't suck. You don't. You might get nervous. You might be overwhelmed. There might be other voices that are telling you that you're not prepared, or you're not this or not that. You might get sweaty. Whatever those things are, they're easily fixable. But you have to tell yourself that, you know what? No, I am good. I am qualified. I am, capable of doing this job well. You have to start telling yourself that mantra. And then remind yourself that the interviewees don't know you from Jack. So they're going to be a completely fresh tablet for you. And if you walk in there like, you know what, I'm going to give it my best, I feel good. I know my experience. I know where I come from. I know what I'm doing. You're going to your chest is going to puff up a little bit. You're going to feel more relaxed. You're going to take that breath after every question and it will help you with that confidence you need. Yes, you are your own best friend, that part. You got to hype yourself up a little bit. Next question came in. How can candidates get better at discerning being interviewed for a job where there is an intention to fill the role versus interviews being conducted likely only for HR compliance? Let me take a swig of water for that one second. Okay. Because this is happening a lot right now in this market. It happens all the time, but it's happening a lot right now. How you can better discern, there's a couple ways, and it starts with the first interview. In my opinion, the first interview is the opportunity to get a lot of the red flag questions out of the way that you should be asking before you even move further along in the process. Which leads me to a quick point I want to make on the side here that you should be treating every single round like an investigation on your own. I cannot tell you how many times I've had candidates who don't ask a single question in the entire process, not a single one. And I cannot stress enough, it's critical that at every stage you are asking questions so that you can vet if these folks are serious. In the first round, when you're talking to the recruiter, let's say they have a recruiter and they're doing screening questions, that is the opportunity for you to ask them about their time to fill. So if they say, tell us more about you and this and that and the third, you can say, and you have that dialogue, and then they say, do you have any questions for me before we get started with the first interview? I want you to frame it like this. Yeah, I'm just really excited for the opportunity and I've really loved our conversation today. So I look forward to speaking more with the hiring manager and the rest of the team. I would love to hear from you, what the expected timeline is to fill the role, because I'm really excited to, um, you know, be in the process and would love to hear from you what the timeline expectations, not only for my process, but just to fill the role would be, so I can get a sense of how fast we're moving. The reason why you want to ask that in the very beginning is because if that recruiter says, well, right now we're just assessing candidates and we don't really have a hard deadline. We're just really, trying to interview great candidates like yourself and get a sense of that's a red flag. If they go, well, for your process, we're thinking, 4 or 5 rounds. And this is typically what those rounds look like. And we're trying to have those over the course of 5 months. Depending on which industry, there are some industries that historically work slower and even international spaces that work slower. But historically, mm-mm. If they say, "Oh, well, we're moving very quickly. We really need to fill this role, and here's what we're looking for," and blah blah blah, that's a good sign that they are actively searching and they are trying to find somebody to fill that role quickly. So you're going to learn a lot from how that recruiter responds. Let's, going to the first round interview. Let's say you're talking with the hiring manager. Okay. A lot of times, folks in that first interview will ask questions about, what are your expectations for the first 90 days of the role? And, what can somebody expect on the team? And what is a pain point that I could solve? Those are all really, really good questions. But in the first interview you have with the hiring manager, another way to vet if they're actually serious about filling the role or not is you can ask them, in what ways will this role help you immediately help you with the uh lift that is take how will this role immediately lift off of your plate? That's what I want to say. So how can this role immediately lift off of your plate? When you speak to immediacy, that communicates to them subconsciously that you're looking to move quickly. If they balk at that and go, well, there's not so much that we have on my plate right now that I'm not managing myself. Right now, we're kind of in a growth phase where if they give you any kind of nebulous response to that, like, oh, well, I mean, right now we don't have any major issues going on. We're just really trying to fill for the could be a sign that they're teasing the waters a little bit. But if that hiring manager goes, oh, let me get, well, first, we need that, because I've done that in interviews. I have been the hiring manager that's been like, let me tell you, I need this and this and that. I'm like, I'm excited to answer that question because I'm literally hiring to fill that role quickly. That's going to give you a lot of response. And then the third question for now, that I would recommend that you ask is when you are speaking with like maybe they have a panel interview, if that's an option, or they have you meeting with more than one person. um, Going back to that immediacy principle, right? I want you to ask them the same questions you asked the recruiter. How quickly are you all looking to fill this role? And how does the speed in which you are able to fill this role impact the quarterly objectives for the department? Because what you're strategically asking them is, will hiring somebody quickly for this role is it a part of a grander strategy for the organization, or will it have no impact? So if they respond to you and say, "Oh, well, right now everything's moving as appropriate, and like I said, we're looking to fill this role so that they can help us as we, execute what's already in progress and blah 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 blah." Could be fine, but in a lot of cases, that's a non-committal answer versus, um, versus a little bit more obvious, which is, um, I don't know if it necessarily helps with objectives. Where right now we just realized we identified a need, and anything like that can be a problem. But if they go, yes, if somebody were to able to come in and make an immediate impact by way of da 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 da, it absolutely will help us because da 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 da. Again, that lets you know that they are serious about filling that role quickly. So those are three questions that you can ask in the interview process, that'll help you get clarity directly from the source if they're serious, about interviewing or about filling that role. These are great. These are great questions. And there's something really important too that I want you to remember as you are, navigating the interview process, because I recognize that there's a lot of folks who've there's a lot of folks who have asked interview forward questions. If you have an interview coming up this week and this COO is seeing you, is looking at you right now, okay? I need you to remember that they invited you into that room because they are excited about you. They're excited about your experience. I cannot tell you how many times I've looked at a resume and I have been literally ecstatic because it has been somebody who has the exact qualifications we're looking for. They have everything we need. And my thought as a leader is, dang it, how can I get them to, like, there's been times where I've been like, okay, how fast can we move for them to start in like a week? Do you think they could start in a week? Do you think they have another job lineup? Do you think they have? I mean, so many times I have had those conversations where I've been like, "Do you think we could get them to start, maybe do a soft on-ramp and then we could do," and I've worked at businesses where we've done soft onboardings with candidates who we were so excited about. We were like, "Listen, you don't even have to come on full time. We'll do a soft onboarding just so we can get you integrated with the system before your official start date." Like, they're excited about you. So I want you to internalize that as you're walking into these spaces for these interviews and remind yourself that everything I've done on my resume, I've already done. It's done. Meaning all I have to do is go back and recall it. All I've got to do is look back and say, okay, what scenarios am I going to pick from that I feel really proud of, that I'm really excited about? And remember, going back to what I said about the halo effect, that is your elevator pitch to be able to communicate at the very beginning that y'all made the right choice and invited me in here for this interview. But if you are still listening to those voices that don't even belong to you, remember that. Anytime a voice comes up into your head as you're walking into that office, you're about to turn on that Zoom call before that interview, and you're hearing, you're going to mess up your words again, or you don't interview well, or you're not good at this, or they're going to be whatever it is, right? You have to remember to tell yourself that's not my voice, so whose voice is that? Because it's not mine. I'm that ish. And tell yourself that over and over again so that you can walk in there in the best possible way you can, because they're excited to see you. Okay. Here's another question from Instagram. What if they're excited about you, but don't support you when you get there? This is a good question because how often does this happen, right? It's like the Venus flytrap. It's sweet smelling, everything's smelling good. And then they get you. And then you're like, shoot, okay, a lot of the things you said you were going to support me on isn't happening. Now, there's a couple of nuances I want to talk about this super quickly before I dive into the more direct answer, which is a lot of times, and I know that if I would be remiss if I didn't say that a lot of times leaders genuinely, at least the ones I've worked with, and I've seen all types of leaders to be very, very clear, but I've worked with a lot of leaders who genuinely want, in fact, I'll speak about myself, genuinely wanted to provide every single thing that was discussed in the interview process, the professional development budget, the certification support, the raises, the promotion timelines. And I cannot express enough to you that so often the reason why those things don't materialize is not because you've done anything wrong, even though sometimes it can be performance related, but then a lot of the time that is transparently communicated. We'd like to hope, and toxic work environments will exclude that, but you get it. But a lot of times it's from the higher ups. There have been many, many times in my career where I have promised something to an employee that up until a certain point was promisable. So let's be very clear. It was something that was like, yes, this is something we've done. It's a standard. We're going to do it. And then for whatever reason, whether that be budget constraints, whether that be leadership power trips, whether that be politics, suddenly that no longer becomes available. Okay. So that is a nuanced element too. But let's say, right, you get to the business, they've told you all these great things to get you to work there, and you get there and they don't want to support you at all. Well, here's what I always recommend in that scenario: start mapping your pivot plan right away, because the moment that you realize that a company is not serving you anymore is the moment you need to start embedding in your noggin that you need to get out of there. Because here's what the threat is when you acknowledge it but don't internalize it. For so many people, and think about a lot of respectfully, right? A lot of boomers, a lot of Gen Xers, a lot of older millennials that were taught, if you get at a good company, stay there, stick it out. Doesn't matter how bad they're treating you. You got a good government job, a good stable job, a good factory job, a good whatever, stick it around, right? Younger millennials and Gen Zs and Gen Alphas are turning that around entirely, and now we have a pendulum swinging on a whole other place where people are like leaving after 3 months and pivoting after, because so there's a balance to strike. I fall in the camp that the moment I realize that a company is not supporting me anymore, we're not in love no more. And I have to say that out loud to myself. We're not in love no more, which means I need to internalize I am not happy here, because I have been in a couple of scenarios where I have pushed that away, and you look up and you've been at a company longer than you should be. So you need to internalize that. I want you to go home and say, "Okay, I'm not getting what I feel I need here. So here's my plan to self-advocate." The first step is self-advocacy. Okay? It's who do I need to talk to on my team? Have I had a meeting with my leadership yet? Yes or no? Okay, what did they say? What did they say I needed to do? Did they say that I needed to do anything? Did they say come back in 6 months? What did they tell me? Okay. So that gives you your first line of communication. So let's say they promised you that you'd get a budget for getting your bachelor's degree or a master's degree or advanced certification, and they're delaying that. What specifically did your leadership say? Did they say come back in 6 months? Did they say whatever? Write that down. Then I want you to look at the role that you're trying to strive for, or the certifications you're trying to strive for, whatever the case. And then ask yourself, can I get there by other means? Meaning, do I have to leave this company? Or if it's a certification, can I get it by way of grant or a scholarship? Or can I afford it myself? How can I make that happen regardless of the organization and whatever, hinky timelines they're on? Okay. The third thing is if that's not possible and also they're kicking the can down the road, because let's say in 6 months' time, I listen to them, I do everything they say I'm supposed to do, and they're still kicking it down, right? I've now tracked for myself empirical data that shows me that A, my company is not interested in moving me in the way that I want to move. And they're not giving me in every single checkpoint that they want me to hit, I'm hitting, and it's still not happening. I looked over here to see how I can manifest it, materialize it for myself. And in some scenarios, great, you get it anyway and you do it yourself on the side. You find programs or you just pay for it yourself so you can keep moving forward. And then thirdly, I found the career and industry I actually want to be in. And I've already started optimizing my resume and my LinkedIn to start reflecting that. Okay. Once you start that process, your mind is going to change because then you're going to start looking at your organization a little differently because you're seeing that the reality is possible for you to be in a position you actually feel aligned to and you feel will support you. The next phase after you've started that is actively pursuing new opportunity, both internally, and I do not mean internal jobs. Remember what I said at the beginning of our session tonight about about the principle of if you're pivoting, start with where you currently are. If you know you want to be a project manager, but you're not actively managing projects at work, you don't have to start applying to project management jobs right away to start becoming a project manager. You can start at that company. Okay, let me jump on some different projects over here. How can I support projects over here? How can I partner with other departments here for this or that? Right? You become a project manager where you are. You step into that reality where you are, whether they promote you into it or not, because they're going to be happy. And this is the funny song and dance that we're going to be doing. They'll be happy because they're like, oh wow, look at them dialing in. Meanwhile, you and I both know that you are planting seeds. You're adding things to your resume as you are making your plan to escape, right? And then after you do that, you'll then start applying to project manager jobs in this scenario because you've already been doing project management for the last year. And meanwhile, maybe you got your P&P on the side because they said they were going to pay for it for whatever reason they didn't and they're not. So you went ahead and got it. I'm just saying. So now you haven't waited for them. You look up, it's been a year, and you can be one of two people. You can be the person who waited for them to tell you with that when they were going to support you and when it was going to come and all the other things, or after a year you've gotten your P&P, you've already been doing projects at your company, your resume is reflecting it, and you've already been getting interviews on the side for where you want to be. Boom. So actively make that plan. Thank you. I'm so glad this is helpful, y'all. Um so as we close, there's a couple of announcements I want to not announcements, but like reminders I want to share. First and foremost, if you want to work with me one on one for an Empower Hour this week, please head to my link in bio because on March 1st, my Empower Hour prices are going up just slightly. And so if you want to meet with me one on one at the current offering, you have until the last day of February to do so. So that's coming very close. If you've always wanted to work with me one on one, maybe you want to pick my brain about something you're navigating, maybe you want to. Work with me on your interview process. Maybe you want me to take a look at your resume, whatever it is. I have Empower Hours at my link in bio, also on YouTube at my bio, and then of course at my website where you and I can grab that time. And on the last day of February is the last day to get it at its current pricing. So please head over there so that you and I can work together. And I look forward to working with you. And then also, please make sure you are following me across platforms. Our YouTube community is growing so fast. I am so excited to see community members heading over there. So if you'd like to see me in the Y2 right now on Instagram, you've got me like, but if you want to see me on YouTube with I got the whole backdrop and everything back here, please make sure you head over there because I will be continuing to develop content for YouTube as well. And then finally, please follow if you have been watching along and like to join the community and have real conversations about how we can you know create change and support one another in this hiring market, and in corporates and in company culture and all of the things. Please make sure you follow. And otherwise, I hope you all have a I hope you all have a great rest of your night. This was Sunday Scaries, where we are here on Sundays to talk about all things before your scaries because we don't do that here. We don't do Sunday scaries here. And the last thing is there will not be a Sunday scaries next week as I will be performing at Karaoke Storytellers here in Chicago. So if you are in the Chicagoland area and you want to see me get to connect live, you can actually see me at Karaoke Storytellers on Sunday, the 22nd. So I will not be doing a Sunday Scaries because I will be performing there. And if you'd like to grab tickets, there are only, I think, 10 left. As of this call. And so please head over to Karaoke Storytellers. I've tagged them in my stories. You can also look them up, Karaoke Storytellers Chicago, and you can grab tickets for my first ever performance with them. And so I'm so excited to be connected with community there the next Sunday. And in the meantime, keep a lookout for all the other times I go live, and I will see you all soon. So have a great night and listen, keep those Sunday scaries at bay and know that somebody is in your corner to help them fly, fly far away. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good night.